yeah, so as you see, we've got a much more kind of clean and full look to the design here. More links to kind of get access to the information you need, as well as linking out to the various elements outside of the game as well, like the inventory in the store, and soon, hopefully, to be leaderboards have also had a visual upgrade. Look a lot cleaner. Also now on leaderboards, you can now see the position of yourself at all times. If you are not kind of, if you're outside of the kind of max size of a certain leaderboard, it will just say, you're outside of that range. But yes, you can now see your own rank regardless of where you are on the leaderboard. Completely new visual on the game board. We're using proper assets, like really clear, should feel more kind of, as we intend. So yeah, the river kind of matches more what we expect. The game board matches more what we expect. The cards, obviously, from before are what we expect. Styling kind of across the board is kind of been overhauled. But yeah, there's a lot to go over here. So the starting deck is now reduced to 6 cards, which you both start with at the beginning of the game. Those 6 cards are the 2 dummies that we've got right now. And then the 2 attachments, which we have right now, and then 2 mining cards. Essentially meaning that every card should be relevant for kind of majority of the game. And by the time you get later on, you should have so many draw effects that they don't really lose relevance anymore. Attachments are now played onto the board again. But it's not only that. Instead of dragging to a specific slot, you can actually just drag it straight to the unit. So the interaction is far more intuitive. And what it will do is it will just put it into the next available slot. Now, you might be saying, well, what if I just want to put it in a certain slot? What if I want to replace stuff? So the change in this version is that you actually can't replace attachments anymore. So once you've put an attachment on a unit, it's now attached to that unit until it's destroyed. This basically means that attachment slots now function as kind of like limited, limited attachment slots. Once they're full, they're full. Which allows us to kind of put a lot more power into attachments at the same time, make them more significant. And you've noticed here, so I was saying before about how powers typically lean more in towards gaining faction points as their like secondary use case. So for attachments, their secondary use case is more about drawing cards. Because before I said, we've removed the draw card from the starting set, which used to be the kind of backbone of kind of cycling. Well, now most attachments have a drawing element to them. Which accelerates the gameplay, being one of our other core focuses. So now attachments will typically cycle themselves. And an additional reason for this is because now when a unit is destroyed, the attachments are separated. The reason for this is because of the nature of the gameplay now in terms of fast cycling. What we don't want is to get into a case where you're focused on having low deck sizes. So even in the case where they separate, because they draw additional cards, the separation shouldn't impact the kind of, it shouldn't act as like a dead draw that would have otherwise occurred. So basically attachments have been simplified, but also given a significant role to make them different from powers. And the way we kind of like to look at this is attachments are kind of more like your permanent customizations for a unit, and powers are like your supporting temporary effects based on a certain situation or scenario. Because you've probably also noticed that attachments have typically 3 elements to them. They have the stats that they provide, and then they have the effects that they provide. So one of those typically being draw, and then the other one being its actual attachment effect. So we have this kind of stat climbing. So for faction points, the points now come from cards, most commonly powers. So if you see here where I'm hovering this ancestral knowledge, you'll see this +5 FP with a green background. And that basically means that I get 5 native faction points when I play this card. Probably some of the biggest changes are resources have been heavily looked at. The first change being energy has been removed entirely. As you'll see, there's no numbers on any of these cards, which basically means if I have it in my hand, I can play it. So if I show you like so, in terms of credits, cards no longer have like individual credit values. Instead, we simply say you can buy one card per turn as like a default, and mining now provides an extra buy. So if I play these cards, you'll see I now have 3 purchases, which I can now take any of these cards. So first things first, we have new tooltips. So cards now have tooltips, which kind of stick to the location of said card, makes it much easier to understand, what is this card doing, gives me the information, and it's also much more kind of contextualized. So the information that is displayed should, in theory, be the kind of information that is needed. And we try to hide anything that may not be needed at a certain location. We've kind of made is, for example, the void pile has been removed. We only have a draw pile and the kind of old cycle mechanic. So essentially, once a card is destroyed, it's put on the bottom of the draw pile, and you just draw continuously. Now, you may then say, aren't I able to play cards over and over again? And yes, but that's also the intention of the game, is that we want the cycling to be the kind of one of those core mechanics. And the way we've addressed this is by saying, well, fatigue is now a mechanic that says when you cycle your deck, you take damage. So every time I cycle, for example here, if I play Ancestral Knowledge, I'm going to draw 2 cards because my opponent has 2 units. If I play this card, you'll see I take 200 damage. Every time you cycle your deck, you take a flat 200 for now. Turn timer is dropping to 90 seconds. Obviously, it's been a kind of heavily discussed point that 2 minutes is probably too long. This was kind of there for the newer players, because it does take time to get used to things. But now, with how we've tried to simplify the overall kind of game loop, we're hoping that 90 seconds should kind of help it in some way. And obviously, if we need to adjust it further, then we can now. So this blue number here, it shows the round number, but it also serves as like 2 functions, and it's like it is the round number, but it's actually more kind of importantly something else. And the something else is speed. So the way the speed system works is quite similar to how the old credit system works, in that before, credits was the cost, but it was also the kind of pace that cards would be displayed in the river. So basically now we've kind of stripped away the cost aspect, and it simply functions as the round counter, or the speed counter, however you want to look at this, is kind of the maximum speed of cards that can display in the river. And I just noticed I'm not displaying speed on other cards, so I need to add that in. But yeah, if you notice, like Telekpa Mercenary, it has a speed of 1, and if you notice Telekpa Rallier, it has a speed of 2, which basically means on round 1 I can see Mercenary and I can't see Rallier, but on round 2 I can see Rallier and Mercenary and everything below it. So this is kind of how we control what cards are showing up in the river, which gives us the control to have like later cards show up later, or strong cards to show up later, things like that. Yeah, so this is a new system called Speed. Just very simply, it just controls the pace of the game. Now you might be asking, spending. We don't spend in Genesis. So the way that the kind of faction points and enhanced system now tie in together is you kind of build your faction points with powers and effects. And then what happens is, sadly I don't have a card. Oh, I can actually. Yeah, this is actually perfect timing. It's almost like it's scripted. So these 2 systems have always existed, and they kind of work together, but they've never felt just quite right. And so what you do now is you gain your faction points through effects. And let's say I have this Metron Courier here, and I want to enhance him. Well, if I click him, I can enhance him. Now, the difference here is, and you'll notice that my mech faction points are now back at 0 because I spent the 20 enhance cost to now enhance this unit. And the way that enhance now works is once you enhance a unit, it remains enhanced for the remainder of the game. And this is our mechanism for progress. This is how we control early, mid, and late game. At the start of the game, you have your base units. Oh, and this is something else. Every unit now has no effect on the base form. You only gain those effects by enhancing. And what this allows it for is every game can be heavily varied because you can change the ordering that you're enhancing units. which just opens up so many different like options for strategy. Like one game I can say, right, I'm going to go Courier first, into Haggler second, into Cridian Tinkerer third, and then the next game I can do it in the other order, and it can completely change how the game is played. And this way, you know, you start the game with no enhanced units. A few turns later, you get one enhanced unit. A few turns later, you get a second. A few turns later, a third. And this is how we develop our stages of the refresh works now. Is it's very simple. Once per turn, you can refresh. There's no cost to it. It's completely set to everything. This is a way that we can kind of reduce the kind of RNG factor in a way. So yeah, with more card draw on attachments, with more refreshes on the river, you should feel that the randomness is still, you know, it still exists, but it's more controllable to an extent. Remodels felt as though it existed as a system that actually, let me rewind a bit. It was a system that we introduced to solve this problem of this need to replace early cards with later ones because the early cards became redundant. And so rather than saying, hey, you know, we need cards to be redundant early, we've now kind of made it more along the lines of like cards should somewhat have a relevance throughout. And if you kind of meet this goal of saying like a card should kind of be relevant throughout, you no longer need to remodel it. So for example, with the starter cards, these were the most common ones to need to remodel. What we've done is, for example, so draw is removed, energizer is removed, mining is now +1 buy, which is relevant for the majority of the game. It also provides faction points, which we haven't kind of gone into yet. We have simplified our kind of triggers for effects. So instead of using these kind of words like, you know, kill or attack or guard, things like this, we're now using more literal English. So, you know, when attacks, when destroys, when played, stuff like this. This should hopefully make effect reading way clearer, so that you can understand what the cards do. Now, another change we've made is that breakthrough is now like a default thing across the board. So anytime, am I able to example ancestral knowledge? No, of course not, because I didn't get any attack stuff. But you might have noticed through the game that when you attack with a unit that has like higher attack than the defending unit's defense, the difference is dealt as damage. And the reason for this is, again, going back to, we wanted the gameplay to become more fast-paced. We wanted every turn to matter. We want these moments where you can really have these swingy turns. So now breakthrough is on by default to kind of accelerate and just push the even when you're just trading back and forth, the game is moving towards an end point, because I think it happens all too often in Genesis where you get into this board state of, I play my board, I kill your board, you kill my board, and then I play, and then you play your board, right? And we get into this back and forth where the life is not going down and you're just kind of waiting for fatigue to kill. And yeah, one other thing is, you've probably noticed, is the numbers are now multiplied by 100 again. We're just going to try it out, see how it feels, and take it from there. But, you know, big numbers obviously equals better. So, yeah. Missed one big feature. So, I kind of hinted it a long time ago that we wanted this visibility on the river. Because it's kind of difficult to build a strategy when you don't know what's available for the future. And so we have this thing called Strategy Terminal. Now, this is a feature that is probably not something you want to really care much about if you're like a beginner. This is more something when you kind of get into the game, once you know how the cards work and stuff like this. But essentially, if you open this up, you'll basically see it has an entire overview of the river broken down by speed. So you can kind of see like what cards are available at any time in the game. It also shows you how many copies of a card is in the game. So these little circles above will show you the number of copies that are actually available in the game. And when a card is purchased, you'll notice that the orb kind of fades out, so you know how many are left in the river. Now, we've also moved the kind of, you know, deck list of what you've purchased into this window too. So there's also some other cool stuff that this can do. So for example, at the beginning of the game, I say, I want to go for the strategy with this bodyguard, right? Well, what I can do is I can come into the strategy terminal at the start of the game, And where is he? I can come to bodyguard, and if I click it, you'll see one of the orbs turns blue. And this is basically saying, I want to buy 1 copy of this card. If I want to buy more, I can just click it more, as many cards as copies I want. And if you right-click, it will reduce the copies. Now, when you have a card that is kind of flagged as like you want this card, if you look at the river, it's glowing. So you kind of mark the cards saying like, hey, I'm kind of intending to go this route. And when they show up in the river, they glow so that you don't miss. Outside of this, there's kind of performance improvements kind of behind the scenes that should hopefully, improve things for people across the board on different systems. The way that, end of turn effects have been implemented has been completely rewritten. So, none of those century. Oh yeah, so it's been renamed. None of those like century, mishaps anymore. Other end turn effects should kind of happen at the end of the turn, like they're supposed to. And yeah, there's kind of like just bug fixes scattered throughout.